Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think might be underrated, underseen, or sometimes we just want to talk about them. I'm the host for this week, Josh Hallam, and it was Alice's turn to pick this week, so she picked a listener's suggestion, which was Reign of Fire from 2002. So, let's see what we think. So, Alice, Reign of Fire.
Oh, yes.
Which is not Reign Over Me. Which is what I keep calling it.
Yes.
Which is a film we did about 18 months ago. Do listen to it. Very different to this film, if you want. Make it a double bill. The Reign Over Me, Reign of Fire, back to back.
I love that.
Make it like Barbenheimer, Rainenheimer. Yeah. Anyway, so this one, it's a listener suggestion, Alice. So we get listeners who suggest films for us, we put them to one side, and every now and then one of them goes through and goes, oh, I like the sound of that one, I'm going to pick it, which is what you did.
That's exactly what I did. Reign of Fire, not one that I've seen before, but has kind of been on my radar a little bit for a little while. So sometimes Ollie, my husband, will say things that make it sound like he has no idea what the podcast is about or how it works. Because a few times he said to me, you should do Reign of Fire for the podcast, you know. You should do Reign of Fire. And I'm like, I haven't seen it, babe. I don't know if it's underrated or underseen. I haven't seen it. He's like, no, but you should do it. You should do it. So here we are. Eva, lovely listener Eva, suggested Reign of Fire. And I was This is it. This is the time. She's
giving you an in.
So, yes, absolutely. So tell us, what did Eva have to say about the film?
So Eva dropped us a little email through our website to suggest Reign of Fire, and she basically has said here she thinks it's a silly film, but somehow there's a sincerity to it that gives it gravitas. Christian Bale throws himself into it, though he's hoping for an Oscar, and his efforts are more than matched by Matthew McConaughey. So everyone is taking it so seriously that the concept of a plague of dragons seems believable, and the peril seems real. I love anything post-apocalyptic, partly because I like the questions raised. How would we live day to day? Would we band together to try and improve things, or would we keep our heads down and try not to die today? I saw Reign of Fire at the cinema, and I remember walking out when it was over and wanting to go on an adventure. I think it was the last film that made me feel that way. About me, anyway. I'm Eva, an English teacher. I used to go to the cinema all the time, but I can't help feeling that if Spielberg, Jackson, Nolan, and the rest would just ask me for my opinion, I could explain everything they're doing wrong and their films would be better. I agree, Eva. I agree. They should ask us. They should ask everybody. So that's a little bit about Eva there and why she's picked it. To answer Eva's question, get my head down, survive every day, fuck everybody else.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
No eye contact, don't speak to anyone, friends don't exist here. Just power through.
Indeed.
So
that is why Eva has picked it. Tell everyone, Alice, so obviously you've got the reason why you've picked it there, but tell everyone just a little bit about what it's about before we go into the likes.
Yes, so Reign of Fire, as Eva said, is a post-apocalyptic science fantasy film starring Christian Bale, Gerard Butler, and Matthew McConaughey. In this world, dragons are real, and they've been asleep deep underground for millions of years. They're woken up when construction workers dig a bit too deep in London and startle them. They then proceed to kill pretty much everyone and everything in sight, turning the whole world to ash. That's the dragons, not the construction workers. We then fast forward 20 years and see how the people left have managed to survive, but there may be hope yet, as an American stranger called Denton Van Zandt, played by McConaughey, thinks he's come up with a way to beat the dragons.
Indeed. Before we get into what we like about it, do you know off the top of your head what year this is set in?
2020, I believe.
It is indeed set in 2020, where of course nothing bad happened to humanity and everything just ticked along and was fine.
Yeah, the Reign of Fire full of shit, doesn't know nothing. You're trying to predict the future, failed.
Is it a metaphor for a pandemic, a plague of dragons?
Maybe.
No, it's not, is it? It's not.
You've got to dig deeper. You've got to dig deeper, Josh, and find the meaning.
When it came on and it said it was in 2020, I was immediately like...
It's funny, isn't it?
It was bad anyway. It was bad anyway, Alice.
Yeah, like but just seeing like when it's like in a far distant future, it's like 2008. Like, whoa, like this is crazy. I love seeing that.
At no point in this alternative 2020 does anyone do a fucking Zoom quiz.
They do.
There's no quizzes. There's no people talking about how there's no loo roll. There's no bleach injecting.
Oh, but although you would, I did find myself questioning, where is the loo roll in this world? Where are the toilets?
Where are the toilets?
There seems to be a bit of running water, but from like these tanks or whatever, there's some electricity. This is what Eva was talking about, figuring out how these people are surviving. What are all the little clues as to how these people have made it this far? So, Josh, had you seen Reign of Fire before?
No, same as you. Your husband is also always suggesting it to me, and also doesn't understand the concept of the podcast. No, I hadn't seen it before. I'd heard of it, and that was about it. When I first started getting into films, and I would read Empire and Total Film and stuff like this, I think I remember seeing an article or a review of something about this, but that is it. And the only other thing I remember about it is that there was a PlayStation game. That came out around the same time. But that's all I remember, just because obviously as a 12, 13-year-old younger lad, you spend a lot of your time, if you're so way inclined, studying game, flicking through secondhand games, or a girl. It's just, that's what I did with my time when I was a teenager. Not gender specific.
Well spent.
Indeed. So no, I hadn't seen it before. Neither had you. So it's not often. This is why listener suggestions are good, because we both watch a film neither of us have seen before. So let's get cracking then. What did you think? What did you like about it?
I mean, in general, it was miles better than I thought it was going to be. I must say, my expectations were so low. Like, I thought it was just going to be like cringe-inducingly cheesy, just kind of really bad, bad scripts, bad acting, I just thought it was going to be bad. Like, I just thought it was going to be super, super cheesy, daft, just not believable or authentic or anything in any way. But I was pleasantly surprised, Josh. And there's actually quite a lot that I liked about it. I'm so pleased to say. What was your general consensus, do you think, if you're going to give a summary?
So similar to you, I went in with not rock bottom expectations or anything like that, because I had seen like a bit of a cover art, art and stuff, and, stills of it, whilst I was looking to watch it and stuff. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because you hear the plot and you see when it was released and you think, well, this is going to be shit. But it's not, because actually I did enjoy it overall, really, really enjoyed it overall. So similar to you, I think it's interesting because before we get into what we like, they go over the concept, and it's like they go to you and they go, this concept, Plague of Dragons, fucking stupid, innit? But what if it was executed with absolute sincerity and like it was real? And they do that, and to mostly there are some bits, but mostly I think they pull it off. So I really, really enjoyed it. So you go first. Then what did you like about it? And then I'll circle back with what I liked about it.
Well, just to echo what you said right there, I really like the concept here, and I love what they've done with it. Because of the dragons, at the start, it feels like it could really go one way or the other. So dragons obviously evoke feelings of magic or fantasy or the supernatural, etc. And the film could have gone down this route, but instead, what it delivers is this awful, dry, barren, ash-covered planet that just looks incredibly hostile and horrible. And it reminded me at times of Terminator Salvation a bit, in terms of like the aesthetic and the general vibe of the whole thing, fire, metal, weapons, scorched landscape, and Christian Bale, obviously. And you come to know the challenges that the survivors who have made it this far have had to face. And a lot of this is conveyed with visuals and with small plot points throughout the narrative. There is the odd moment where certain bits of information are shoehorned in there with some forced bits of scripts. But for the most part, I think the film was really successful at getting everything you need to know across to the audience without being too obvious about it and without over-explaining everything. Like, I was thinking for ages, so how are all these children here, right? Because there's a lot of children in this base that, like, Christian Bale and Gerard Butler have sort of made for themselves. They've made, like, this bit of civilization. And I was like, how the hell are all these kids here when there's virtually no women? And then a little bit later it comes out... We're all the women. But then it comes out a little bit later that Quinn, who's Christian Bale, he found one of the kids next to his mum's dead body. So then you infer from that, okay, well, probably a lot of these kids were found, like when they were traveling, because he's from London.
Saved, adopted.
Exactly, yeah. So you get those blanks filled in for you without it being too over the top, I thought. And that's kind of believable too. Performance-wise, I thought Bale and Butler together were wonderful. I thought their characters have a really nice relationship and the two of them have some great on-screen chemistry and their relationship felt authentic. There's a funny moment between them where Quinn says something like you'd expect to find in an action film when he tells Gerard Butler's character, who's called Creedy, if anything happens to me, you know what to do. And then Creedy responds by saying, no, actually, I have no idea. And this felt quite real and is like a nice reminder that these guys aren't heroes, they're just survivors and they're making it up as they go along. And then you got Matthew McConaughey, who I thought was great. So his character, Van Zan, he's like a cowboy that rides into town on a tank. Like when you see him on that tank, his legs are spread and his posture makes it look like he's riding a horse. And then obviously the shot pulls out. It's like, oh no, he's just atop his massive tank. And I love that. And I love his whole aesthetic around that. He feels like really angry and really determined and is willing to do anything to get rid of the dragons, whereas Quinn is more determined to keep his people alive and fed and well and is like a bit more emotionally invested in individuals. So they come to blows because of their opposing views. And there's this really great fist fight that occurs between the two of them, which feels really visceral and really desperate. And I thought that was a really great moment too. I'll slow down a little bit there. See, there's a lot to like about this film, Eva. I'm so glad you made us pick it. What about you, Josh? What were some of the things that you liked about it?
Yeah, it's similar things. I think just to pick up on a point you said there, the point about the sort of Christian Bale makes an intense comment and then Creedy comes back with "I don't know." Do you know what it is? It dawned on me as I was watching it. It's a Hollywood post-apocalyptic film with quite a British sentiment to it. You don't see many post-apocalyptic films set in Britain. They're normally just set in America, New York. You know, a lot of them are set worldwide, but you know what I mean. Like this is a good portion of this film takes place at Northumberland.
Yeah,
is it Northumberland? It is Northumberland, isn't it?
Northumberland, yeah.
Yeah,
is, yeah.
So you know that's not very Hollywood to be sitting there like what about in Northumberland? Like it's like
you imagine
most
the American
Hollywood people will be like
London,
and London and nowhere else.
London. Only London is existing.
But yeah, so it's quite. I like that it's post-apocalyptic. I like that by setting it in Britain, it gives you that opportunity for that British sentimentality. It just felt like it's a little different flavour of a post-apocalyptic film. We've seen, we've seen loads of post-apocalyptic films, but I've never really seen one like this before, where the concept is so out there, but the rules of the world are so clear. So even in things like Terminator Salvation, it'll be focused on one mission, and if we do this, it's this, and this is how the world works. Whereas this, it's so daft. They just go, no, Plague of Dragons. Plague of Dragons, and we're living day to day with it. So, you know, you don't go out after this time. You can't do this. You can't draw them in with this. This is how these things work. And I really, really enjoyed it. But also by setting it in Britain and having it post-apocalyptic and having it dragon related, the whole thing had a sort of Arthurian legend feel to it as well.
Yeah, they sort of bring that up as well, don't they? They do mention that about killing the dragons. He's like, oh, what are you, King Arthur? Or something like that. And it means we get to hear the word wanker.
Yeah,
which I always love. I always love hearing that in a film.
I love that you've got like Matthew McConaughey and all his soldiers in there who are, they say they're from Kentucky?
I think, he definitely mentions Kentucky.
So they have got across the Atlantic. Yeah. Like somehow, unless they were already in Britain 20 odd years ago when it happened, which obviously would make them all older than they probably are, then they've got across the sea. I suppose they could have been somewhere else. But yeah, so overall, loved the concept, loved the production design. I thought it looked really great in the world building. I think first thing, we don't touch on this a lot, real sets. How many films have you seen recently where you're just looking at it going, well, that's all green screen and that's all projection,
all CGI,
nothing looks real and everything looks like a blob. And in this, there's towards the end, there's a big sort of climactic scene in London. There's obviously the bit in Northumberland where they're at the castle, and I thought it was brilliant. Like all the sets were brilliant. Really good care had been taken to show how these people were living, and the production design. I just thought that it was really, really good. Really good effects around the dragons as well. They very much took the Jaws approach, which is less is more. Because there was bits where I thought, 2002 CGI dragons. I'm not sure about this. And there's one or two bits where it's a bit chonky, but for most of the time, they obscure them, they show them in shadow, they don't show them too close up, and they look great. For the time, I thought they looked really, really good. So I like that as well. Love some of the set pieces. I thought the highlight for me was there's a whole set piece around how you try and capture and kill a dragon by basically chucking some blokes out of a helicopter with parachutes and trying to trap them in a net. And that made for a really good, like, tense set piece. So I really, really enjoyed that. I mean, there's some other good set pieces as well, but that was a highlight to me. There's a bit where they're essentially like falling before they release their parachute, and they're trying to lure a dragon to chase them. So there's a dragon chasing these blokes who are just essentially falling before they can set their parachute up. And then the whole idea was you trap the dragon in the net. So really enjoyed that. I thought the performance was really, really good. I thought Christian Bale was really good in this. He's really, really intense. It's quite an intense film, which probably will come up a little bit later. But what I liked about his character, so his performance was great. What I liked about his character is they linked him to the plot. So it's him he is there when the dragons presumably are discovered. Yeah. So by linking the lead character to the whole idea of how the world was created, it just gave another layer of emotional depth and another layer of engagement to the film, which I really, really liked. Matthew McConaughey, again, incredibly intense, but really good as the sort of Colonel Kurtz type rogue soldier trying to get the job done, who's sort of he's seen some shit and he's sort of lost his marbles a little bit, but he's also incredibly intense and constantly doesn't have a shirt on and shaved head, big beard and stuff like that. So you know what, that's more or less a little summary of what I like. But you know what, I really enjoyed it. It felt, there was times when I thought, oh, I've seen this color scheme before, I've seen this before, but then every now and then I'd remind myself that I haven't, because this is dragons. Do you know what I mean? Whereas it's not a Transformers film, or it's not an anonymous CGI blob fest of grey and building, not knowing what a building is and not knowing what a person is. It was almost weighed down by what came after it. But for me, it was like, it was almost like a medieval adventure film mixed with like 28 Days Later. Like I'd enjoyed it. I'd definitely watch it again. But anyway, what else from you?
So just finally, and you kind of touched on some of this there, but I feel like the film achieves a lot with very little. So we're really limited here in terms of the different locations and the settings. We don't really see that many different places at all. And we don't see a huge amount of the dragons either, which I do think was the right way to go about it, like you said. So there's a moment where they think a dragon is nearby, and you see a few rocks fall down like this sort of small cliff face thing. And there's just a tiny little moment, but it's the threat of their presence is quite menacing. And I thought little touches like that really are the way to go. When you understand your limitations with CGI, for the time, I think it's really, really good, but it has dated quite rapidly, I think. So doing the little things like, oh, a dragon was here, or, oh, a dragon is nearby, those things were really effective. And I think really were just done really, really well in this.
Okay, so we'll move on then to talking about things that we perhaps didn't like about Reign of Fire, or that we might change about it. Is there much for you, Ellis?
There's a couple of little things, but there wasn't any sort of overarching big offender, really. On the whole, I was really pleasantly surprised, but my expectations were low. But so in my opinion, and please do correct me if you hear something different in this, but pretty much every English character in this, including Christian Bale, sounds like they are just doing the worst English accent. Like, I don't know what's going on. It just felt like that maybe that were they British actors and or were they doing a voice, or were they not British actors, but they were told that they needed to be English? Like, was it filmed in America? And so you've got a lot of American extras that are having to do English accents? I don't know, but it sounded bad and weird, especially that opening sequence. You know, when we're on the construction site, when you see Quinn's mum and all her colleagues and stuff,
she lets her small son into the London Underground that's being dug up without a helmet.
Mad, that, isn't it?
Come on in, son. Come and find some dragons.
But that's what they sound like. That's what they sound like.
It is. It's probably like, oh, blimey, crikey. Yeah.
Hello, Quinn, mate. I thought you'd quit smoking. I
try to quit smoking. I can't, can I? Because I'm 8 and I'm from London. No, so it was one of my things. I was watching it. And I watched it quite late. But even then, I made a note to myself. I was like, why is Christian Bale's accent shit?
So
like,
bad.
It's
bad.
his
Just do
accent.
your normal voice. Just do your normal voice.
That's what he sounds like. How could you be? It's like, when someone goes, do an impression of yourself, and you're like, oh, I'm me. Woo-do-do-do-do. You're like, well, how can going to do an impression of myself. That's what it was like. It was. I was watching going, how, it's like, in an IT crowd, it's like a fire at a sea parks. I was like, how can his accent be bad? It's his accent. Yeah.
I'm so thrilled that you picked up on it too, because I was like, when I repeatedly pick up on certain things, I just start thinking, no, I'm the problem. I've got to stop worrying about this. It's not a big deal. So I was like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But I was like, good God, his accent's so weird.
He says like bloody hell like a few times.
Oh, bloody hell, mate. Oh, bloody Van Tan's turned up. We're going to go down to London and kill the dragons. Yeah. It's just like, nah, man, be chill. Just be yourself. It's cool. It's cool. My next point.
What else?
Well, similar, like really sort of low stakes sort of thing, right? But they're all meant to be starving, okay? So the film establishes that food is scarce. And not only that, but the small amount of food that they did expect to have has been reduced because last year's crop failed or something like that. But Quinn looks fantastic. He is in incredible shape and not like someone who is struggling for food at all. Similar with Matthew McConaughey, that man looks like he has no issue accessing protein whatsoever. They are too ripped and look too fabulous considering they're eating like bits of tomato every now and then.
It's funny actually because when I was reading about it, it said something about how classic Christian Bale can't have a standard weight. So it was like Christian Bale considered getting incredibly skinny for this film to show that his character was starving.
Would have worked.
And it said something like, then Matthew McConaughey showed up and was ripped and buff. And so he thought to himself, well, in the scene where they have a fight, it just wouldn't make any sense.
That's true.
If one of them was buff and the other one was skinny. I mean, obviously, you know, he'd just batter him, wouldn't he? But you are right. Yeah. I mean, you could argue that Matthew McConaughey, in terms of the gym, was all right.
We got it in there.
Is this our first Matthew McConaughey film?
That is a terrific question.
I think it is.
I've got one. There is one on my list that I'm waiting to do. And this came out and I was like, okay, great. I mean, not that it's stopped. Like, how many Christian Bale films have we done now? Like, we did American Psycho literally like so recently. But you know what? It's not his fault. He's just one of the best actors in the whole world. So, he's going to be in a lot of films that I love. So, yeah. Dial it down.
They
are
a bit buff.
Yeah, a bit too buff for the world.
Bloody hell, I've got to eat all these crops to sustain muscle mass.
Exactly. And finally, a point that I had written down as one of my likes, right, but then had to change it at the very end of the film. We nearly made it. It nearly got there. Was that I really liked that there was no forced love story between any of the characters. But at the very end, in that almost epilogue part of the film, one of Van Zandt's buddies, so Alex and Quinn, hold hands.
The one female
heavily
character
suggest
in the film,
that they are, so it heavily suggests that they have embarked on a romantic relationship. But she isn't sexualized in any way, it doesn't feel, throughout the film. And the men definitely get their kit off a lot more than the women do in this. But we were so close, Josh, because I don't need... The thing about sort of shoehorning romantic stories in there is that now when there isn't one, I'm always really impressed. I'm like, good for you. You didn't feel like you needed to stoop to that just to kind of force an emotional reaction from the audience. You felt like the film was doing its job. Obviously, one of my favourite films is Terminator 2, or my favourite film is Terminator 2. There is no romantic story in that. Obviously, there is in Terminator 1 because she has to get pregnant to give birth to John. But in Terminator 2, there isn't one. It is about the father figure Terminator and the son, and then, mum character to the side as well. Yeah. Explosions and nuclear blasts and all this stuff. Great, amazing stuff. So I was like, it nearly did it. It nearly got there. But at the very end, it was like, nah, they've got to hold hands.
Because that was one of my notes, was it's completely tacked on. It adds nothing to the story. The only thing you could say is it's hinting that they're going to repopulate society. Well, we know that there's babies, so there must be, unless all the dragons targeted all women so that we couldn't breed and would eventually go extinct. But because all it is them holding hands at the end, right? And it's almost like the director went, hold hands. What? Yeah, no. We need some hint of a future, so hold hands. We didn't need it.
No, so close. So close.
There's not even any hint that they have a romantic feeling towards each other because it's all about survival. And then, like you say, at the end, it's just like they're holding hands and you're like, oh, you've just let yourself down a little bit.
There's one moment, and I was like, oh, he didn't need to do that. But where she gives him, I think she gives him some iodine or something after he's been in the fight with Van Zandt. And she, for some reason, with her dirty, dirty hand, decides to touch his face where he's bleeding from an open wound in his mouth and touches the blood with her dirty, dirty hand. Yeah. And I was just like,
sexy.
You didn't need to do that. Like, he is injured. Please don't put your dirty hands on his face. But it's like, well, I've just given him iodine, so it's all worth it. It's fine. And that was the only kind of moment of intimacy between them. And then obviously trying to kill the dragon and Van Tan's sacrifice and all that. I get that would, maybe bring you closer together and like the charge of the danger and the life-threatening situation they found themselves in and all that. But it just didn't need to happen. It didn't add anything. And I just wish more films would have the balls to just be action or just be fantasy or just be sci-fi, whatever you're doing, instead of, we need the audience to think about these people having sex or for her to come across as sexy. We need the audience to think that she is a viable partner or whatever it is that makes them feel like they have to do it all the time. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too cynical. Maybe it's just to bring a touch of optimism.
Yeah, but they're already rebuilding the world, and then he gives the young lad, he tells him to be the boss of the clan of people or whatever. So that's
nice.
Enough.
Yeah, I like that.
It's just not needed. It's completely tacked on. The one thing you could say is perhaps the hint towards a sequel, but just have them get together in the sequel then. In Reign of Fire 2. The heat is on.
Oh my God, that's epic. Josh, that's epic. I love that. What about you? No, not really. That was it.
A lot of it is what you said there. So the first one, 2 male, all men all the time, all intense men all the time. The whole plot is around the fact that they've got to kill the male dragon. The men have got to kill the male dragon.
Yeah.
So I was a bit like, there could have been more female characters in this. There's no reason why there wouldn't be.
All those kids. Who's looking after them? Who's giving birth to them?
The other thing on top of that is it's a bit dour and a bit intense and a bit moody. So there's a bit where you could have done with a little. I'm not saying everything's got to be Marvel quippy all the time, but it is just a bit dour and a bit moody and a bit sort of sulky all the way through it. And I know why that is. I know what they're going for, but it drained me a little bit in that sense. And that then led to me going, it's just a bit intense. So there's a bit where they kill a dragon, and then they they kill a dragon, despite the fact saying that they hunt well in the day and hunt even better at night. They kill one dragon, and then what they do is have a big party where they shine lights into the sky, which would almost certainly attract a dragon if that's how this world works. So they might as well have fucking put themselves on a plate with some salad next to them and said, eat up. But then Matthew McConaughey's character Van Sant comes in and just bollocks them all because, he's lost some men out there today. And they're having a party. And it's like, it's like that scene we need to show he's really intense and doesn't give a shit about anything until the job's done. But it just wasn't needed. It was just so intense. So a bit overly dour, a bit overly intense, and a bit all men being intense, all men all the time. But other than
tanks and fire and dirt and ash and men and muscles, even though there's no protein.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe Alice. Maybe what they do is they eat the women.
Oh God!
That must be what it is.
I love that though, as like a dark subplot. Like if there's a reason,
where are the women? We ate them.
That's fine. If you can give me a reason, there's no women. I'm here for it. Yeah, we ate them all. Like great. I love that. That's so dark and sinister. Give me that. But it wasn't that. It was just. Oh, there's no women because this is a male-dominated action film. Cool. Yeah. Whatever. I get over it.
Okay, so we'll move on then to talking about the critical reception then. So I suppose actually one thing Eva didn't say is if she thinks it's underseen or underrated. I think based on what she said, she thinks it's maybe let's say it's maybe both. Let's look at both and then we'll decide is it either of those things or is it neither. I haven't seen the critical reception, but do you know what? I have a sneaking suspicion that this did okay critically. Okay. I can sort of imagine it going down, because it's quite sort of grim, and it's not like a big Hollywood action. It's not like an Armageddon or a Day After Tomorrow. It's got a strong concept. And whilst there are special effects, it's not like all-star cast, all CGI, you know, landmarks blowing up and stuff like that. So I reckon the critics and the audience are both quite kind to it and maybe give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
Average. I would say this is a solid 7, maybe a bit over.
Wow, yeah,
It's good. Yeah, I'd watch it again. You know, if they turn around now and went, right, we're making a sequel, I'd watch it.
I'd watch that. You know what? I would.
Yeah.
Now that you've said that, I would watch the heck out of that. I absolutely would.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
Older
you're
Christian
listening.
Bale,
You're listening, Bale.
who's still buff or skinny or fat, whatever the one he wants to be.
He can do it all. He can do it all. But he's still active. McConaughey, still active. Butler, still doing it. We can do this.
Yeah.
Let's see it happen. What did you say? Turn up the heat. Rain of Fire 2, turn up the heat.
Right, Rain of Fire 2, the heat is on.
The heat is on. Excellent. Brilliant. See, you could keep going. There could be endless sequels of this with heat puns.
Yeah.
So at the time of recording, so for me, I wasn't surprised by any of these scores.
Oh, right,
and I'm not
okay.
really too sure why. But anyway, at the time of recording, over on IMDb, the film gets a 6.2 out of 10. And then over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 49%, and then the critics give it 42%.
Gee, so that's an average of 5 out of 10 or 51%-ish. That's harsh. That critic score's harsh.
For some reason, I thought it was, I almost thought it was going to be, like it could be lower. Like I was surprised to see the feeling I get, and I don't know where I've got this from. The feeling I get is that people think this film is lame. And I don't know where I've got that from because I've never seen it before. I don't know why I thought that. I think, you know what? If you wrote that down on a piece of paper, a lot of people would go, oh, like I think they would just turn their nose up at it completely, especially at a time when things like robots and aliens and that kind of dystopic things going on. People hear dragons and like they think, oh, fantasy. So they immediately think a certain thing. And some people are like really snobby about fantasy. Like they're not interested, whatever. It's like, it's that hobbits and goblins and all that nonsense. So I think that's kind of that would be to its detriment that people would hear, oh, dragons in it, how lame. The critics' consensus.
Was it 2002 this?
It was,
2001, 2002.
2002,
right,
okay. You said at the beginning, I'm trusting you. I trust you with my life.
Yeah, I think it is 2002.
So the critics' consensus was that Rain of Fire gains. Listen to this: Rain of Fire gains some altitude with its pyrotechnic action and a smolderingly campy Matthew McConaughey, but the feature's wings are clipped by a derivative script and visual effects that fizzle out. I do think it's a bit harsh on the script there. There are definitely moments in the script that are like overly cheesy and a bit shoehorned in there, but I don't think that's a fair assessment of the entire script at all.
It's quite intense, but I think it's quite indicative of this sort of film at the time. I just wonder, because it came out in 2002, so I'm thinking, well, that's like right in the middle of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it's just after 28 Days Later has come out as well. So you're like 28 Days Later, but it's dragons. And you're like, this should have been a surefire hit. And it seems to not be. I just wonder, I don't think that those lower scores are really harsh. The 6 points, the IMDb, I can get on board with that, you know, that's fine. That's not a massive miss. But the 4s, that's harsh. And this is a perfectly decent concept. It's flawed. There are issues with it, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was an apocalyptic film, decent concept, post-apocalyptic film with a bit of a twist, well enough executed with decent period, sort of good effects for the time. If a little bit cheesy and a little bit intense and overly macho in places, but that's harsh. So my verdict: underrated and probably underseen as well because I don't think it did that well at the box office.
I reckon underrated as well. That was a great shout, Eva. Loved it.
Thanks, Eva.
So there we go. Rain of Fire is underrated. Didn't see that coming. Had low expectations going in, but was very pleasantly surprised. And thank you so much, Eva, for getting in touch with that suggestion.
Thanks,
that was an
Eva.
excellent suggestion. And I'm so pleased I watched it. So on to next week then, Josh. So it's your turn to pick. What are we going to be watching?
Next week, we're going to be watching and talking about Confidence, which is from 2003.
Okie dokie. Confidence. Confident.
Feeling confident?
Feeling confident. Feeling cool. Feeling nice. Okay,
yes, join us next week. Join us next week when we'll find out whether Alice has seen it before or whether she was just bluffing her reaction then. And
always. Mate, I've not seen any films. I'm telling you, I've not seen anything.
Yes, join us next week. We're going to be talking about Confidence from 2003, and we'll see what we reckon to that one, whether it's underrated or underseen. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. If you search for Just Films and That on all the big social media sites, and you'll find us. We're on Patreon as well, so if you fancy a little bit of bonus content, episodes a day early, extended bonus content episodes and things like that, head over to patreon.com/justfilmsandthat. Tiers start at £1 a month, and for that you do get episodes a day early and extended episodes. So any support you can give us is massively appreciated. We're also on the television, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday from 6 p.m, you can catch me and Josh on the local TV network talking about all our favourite underrated and underseen films. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. And I've also been uploading all the episodes to Daily Motion. So if you head on over there and type in Just Films and That, you'll be able to see exactly what it is that we're up to.
Yes, there you go. Lots of ways to see us, hear us, and get in touch with us. So all that remains to be said is thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next week. Goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.